Hello, 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 hello. It's good to see you. Say hello.
Welcome to the Husky Hockey Podcast, your number one resource to remind you that Mike Hastings ran out of Mankato because of the job that St. Cloud State did and kicking them out of the tournament. So congratulations to the Husky. You may not win the Natty this year, but you ran somebody out of town. I think that's how this story is going to unfold, and that's what's going to come out later, right? It wasn't about the program or the more money or anything like that. Hastings was just embarrassed by keep losing to his alma mater.
Yeah, St. Cloud ends the season of 4 teams, and then just ruins a guy's spirit so much that he's just got to run to a Big Ten school.
Just run to Wisconsin of all school. Like, that's how bad that he's got to feel right now, that he just can't even show his face at the Midwest Wireless Center. No, it's a different way.
I think it's a different wireless. Or no, it's the Mayo Clinic, I think, now sponsors it.
Oh, really?
I think so.
Mayo Clinic has outreach in Mankato? Huh.
Well, it's in the 507.
It is in the
Southern
507.
Minnesota.
That's true.
I think they claim it as their own. Mankato does.
That is. I know Sanford was trying to move in there too. Sanford's trying to make a push, and obviously we're Centricare here in this area. So, and then there's the proposed merger between Fairfield and somebody else. There's a lot of politicking going on in healthcare world in Minnesota that you in sunny Arizona probably not privy to.
Look at you.
Yeah.
I don't need to watch CNBC to keep it prized the Minnesota medical mergers.
Yeah.
Wow.
Minnesota medical merger. That's the new 3M right there. Not Minnesota mining and manufacturing. It's the Minnesota medical mergers. It's 3M. So yes, Hastings heads out to the CCHA and goes to Wisconsin, and he's named the head coach and taken his assistant coach. Well, Don Knotts? No, that's not his name.
It's close.
Close. Who was really rumored really to be the head person kind of to take care of or to kind of head up the helm there of the Mavericks. But he's following to Hastings, and now another coaching search has opened up. So it's where one gets filled, one opens up, and the search will continue or start really for Mankato. What I found really interesting is that I can't remember who said it, but somebody in the admin said, yeah, 14 months ago, we prepared like a plan if this were to happen. So it was very much like once they saw the out of town interest that Hastings got, they were like, we should put in some kind of plan in place to make sure that we're not caught with our pants down. Because you don't want to do that in Mankato.
Yes, it's very
bad.
But even that contingency plan, they need a contingency plan for the contingency plan, because it seemed like what that plan was to give this Todd Knott the job. I think it's not, it maybe cannot. I don't know if you pronounce the K there, but Todd Knott told him he will not, see what I did there, be taking the job.
That's clever. I think you're the first one to make that joke too.
I know. That's what should pay me for.
Yeah,
to come up with a fairly obvious wordplay.
Gritty St. Cloud pays us for.
That's right, exactly. But that I think is the most intriguing wrinkle here. Is, I mean, perhaps the pay for being an assistant at Wisconsin is comparable to being the head coach in Mankato.
The way they throw money around, probably.
Perhaps that had a large factor of it. And I read something, some Mankato person was saying, yeah, I mean, this just makes sense, for him to go to Wisconsin because, if he would have taken the BU job, if Hastings would have taken the BU job last year, he's got 3 kids, a family that's entrenched in Mankato. You can't really uproot him to move to the East Coast. But, Madison's just a short 4-hour drive away. Just trying to think well, he could have just stayed in Mankato and not had a 4-hour commute. I don't know what.
Gotta be more than 4 hours, right?
Well, whatever it is, it's not like it's not even like Motzko. I think Motzko's his first year at the Gophers still had his house in St. Cloud, but that got to be too much. The 1 hour each way got to be too much. So they moved down to the cities, the Twin Cities suburbs, I think a year into his gig there. I don't know if it's a family related, I want to stay close to home. That's not really close to home. And the closest to home option would have just been to take the Mankato head coaching position. So I'm like, well, maybe this is just one of these guys that loves to be an assistant and doesn't really want to be a head guy. But he interviewed for both the St. Thomas and the Augustana job. So that's, to me, the fact that did not get the job or passed on it, I think is the most surprising development. And I think it surprised Mankato, their administration as well, because now, as you said, pants down, and you don't want to be caught with your pants down in the 507. So now
all of our southern Minnesota listeners are ticked off at you right now, or nodding in agreement. Really, one of the two. They're probably like, "Yeah, you're right."
I think the latter.
Yeah.
But now we get another set of rumoring to go around. Now, who do you throw out there who are the early Twitter names that were thrown out there?
Well, I don't think Larson's going to be rumored for the Mankato job. So
you'd think
we had to fight off a lot of people who really heavily thought that Larson would have been kind of a front runner for Mankato. Or I'm sorry, for Wisconsin. So,
and as far as we know, did not have an interview with Wisconsin for this job.
I have not heard.
If that could emerge, and I wouldn't be surprised. We mentioned last week. I mean, it's a job that I think a lot of coaches, no matter how entrenched they are in their current programs, would pick up the phone at least.
And not only that, but that's really good job security, because you can be really bad at Madison and they'll still pay you a lot of money for a long time. Granato was there for too long and even got an extension. Like, this was his first year of an extension too that he just had.
Someone's got to calculate the buyout money that he's been getting, because I'm sure
Granato to Mankato
was last year.
There you go.
He's available.
He's available.
Well, maybe he doesn't. Maybe he has like a non-compete. Well, probably not, because he was fired, right? You don't get non-competes if you're fired. But I suppose they could just switch jobs. Hastings to Wisconsin and Granada to Mankato. But
write little notes in each other's office as they move in. And
now, one thing I thought of was, as you mentioned, St. Cloud ending the Mike Hastings tenure in Mankato with that win in Fargo played out a little differently. I mean, in some cases, it's a similar scenario to when Motzko bolted to the Gophers, but different in several key ways.
Is that your Travolta? It's like looking into a mirror, but not.
Yeah,
that was Face Off reference. John Travolta, Nick Cage, for all of my lovely listeners who remember Face Off.
No. And it's a hockey themed movie too, so it's a perfect reference. But the Wisconsin job was open. I mean, they fired Granato the Monday after they crapped out of the Big Ten tournament, which would have been the first weekend in March. So
it was like March 6th, March 7th, somewhere in
something like that. So I remember you had reported that the early Twitter buzz after that was Hastings' name was thrown out there. So, I mean, the rumor, just the vague general rumor was out there. So it's not a complete shock, but it feels to me that the cloud of that didn't affect Mankato's gameplay. It still seemed like it was a different, for all I know, from as far as I know, Wisconsin's athletic director was not in attendance in Fargo, which was different than the Sioux Falls Regional with the Gophers assistant AD. The one that's in charge of hockey was sniffing around in the building. I think he had some ostensible
It wasn't noted that he interviewed for the position prior to the tournament game, so that was a difference as well.
That's a key difference. I think that McGinnis, the Gopher AD, I think he was on the committee that year, so he had some like quote unquote official business reason to be at the regional, but it wasn't too difficult to put 2 and 2 together there, and just the optics of that raised some eyebrows. So just throwing it out there that it played out a little differently. And if this is how Motzko would have left St. Cloud, I think it would have softened the blow a little bit. Just the speed and how it was it's almost kind of clear in the moment during the Air Force game that something was up. Didn't seem like that was the case here with Hastings. And from what I've read from Mankato people, it doesn't seem like there was any animosity built up towards Hastings by making this move, which, again, different in the Motzko St. Cloud scenario. So, but yeah, it'll be interesting to see what Mankato does now. And that's also going to be interesting to see how Hastings adapts to this new gig. I think he's a really good coach.
Yeah.
But his sort of reputation, I see it as more of a coach up kind of guy. He coaches guys up. If you're at the Big Ten school and you have all these resources, you're in a position now to be in the bidding for the best recruits in the country, which is not something that he has really done in Mankato, mostly just out of the circumstance of that Mankato is generally not a school that's going to attract first-round draft pick type talent. I'm confident that he can adapt to that. I think that's easier to adapt into a coach who now can recruit blue chippers rather than the other way around. Someone that's that's been a Big Ten coach and then transitions into a little brother program where they do have to coach up sort of late bloomer type talent. So I'm confident that Hastings can handle the new gig and the bar to clear from his predecessor. It's not a real high leap there. So certainly you'd imagine, I mean, talking about him being a coach up kind of guy, he can probably take this roster that they had this year. Would they win 13 games this year? I bet he could get 4 or 5 more wins just out of their current, like with him not even recruiting anybody, just because that's sort of been his MO at his time in Mankato. So what do you think? How do you think he's going to do in Madison? And then also from Mankato's side, is this going to be a tough, were they sort of buoyed up? Was that program so good, to the fact that they were basically a regular every year NCAA tournament team and then making a couple of Frozen Fours, national title game last year? Is this going to kind of crater that program? Both of those. How do you think Hastings is going to do in Scotty, and how do you think Mankato is going to recover?
First and foremost, I think Hastings is going to thrive in Wisconsin, and kind of Hastings has the way he turned around even Mankato from Troy Jutting. Troy Jutting in his years there, Mankato was always mediocre. They were always lucky to kind of have a plus 500 season. But Hastings comes along, and I think his win percentage at Mankato is over 700. Or 70%. You know what I mean? So it's, so I think turning around Wisconsin is going to be kind of a breeze. Now, the asterisk in that is also going to be Hastings did turn around Mankato when the conference is all split and when it was the CCHA. The way the Big Ten is right now and trending even, that's going to be a little bit tougher. But I think Hastings has got the cachet to bring in, and Knott has been proven to be an incredibly good recruiter from all intents and purposes. So, I think it's going to be I think it's going to be a really good fit for him and a really good challenge for him as well to really recruit against the Michigans and the Minnesotas and whatnot. So, as far as where Mankato goes here, it's going to be tough to replace a guy like that, and who's. It's always kind of the big asterisk of the room, who follows. Obviously when Motzko left, of course, who scores against us, but it's a Brodzinski, so, and then Pino Niemi got some, minutes as well on the Gophers. He was committed to St. Cloud State, and, so it's, there's
really the only two that he plucked, right?
Really?
Or that followed him?
I believe so. And I bet there was one more. And I know that I think there was one more that he tried that he didn't get. So, but I don't, I'm blanking on who the other one could have.
I know those two for sure. And that Pino Niemi really hasn't gotten much regular time. He got action in the regional final, but benched quite frequently this year and hasn't really done much in his time there. But Brodzinski obviously has made quite an impact.
Yeah.
Yeah. See, I don't know if there's been. I've been checking that portal action. Haven't seen any Mankato, Minnesota State action yet, but wouldn't be surprised either. Or if there's recruiting decommits, guys that recruits that follow him to Wisconsin, vice versa too. I know there were some guys in Wisconsin that bolted. I think there's been a guy that's already landed somewhere else, Donovan, since the Granado.
There was one that signed a national letter of intent to go to Wisconsin and is trying to get out of it, and I think he wants to go play in Denver. Okay. So it's so there's going to be a little bit of the shakeups that happen, and it's all going to depend now with. When St. Cloud State opened up the recruit or, for the coaches, we went to a national power, looked at an assistant coach, and that's where we got Larson. So it's interesting if they go that route or if they go head coach in USHL. I know already Nick Oliver's name has been thrown out there as an option. I think that's a little premature, even though Fargo has had a good year in the USHL. So it's, but it'll be kind of interesting to see how everything kind of shakes out over the next couple weeks. For somebody, if it does happen where it does affect St. Cloud State, does Shayak throw his name back in the ring? Head coaching experience, assistant coach here. Would Mankato go that route? Somebody who knows the lay of the land. So. That's there's a lot of question marks, and it's going to be kind of interesting to see where they where all the chips fall.
Yeah, indeed. Shayak's an interesting name out there. I would think that they would tend to go younger, but that's just based on intuition more than anything. Oliver's an interesting name. I mean. When it was floated out there that Larson had potentially could be linked to Wisconsin, just trying to game out the scenario. What if he takes that job? Then who does St. Cloud turn to? I think Oliver's near the top of the list because of the alum connection. Mm-hmm. It's more of a long shot that he would take a Mankato job, but now with him being a coach in having head coaching experience at the UCHL, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility. We saw Denver go quite young with David Carl. He wasn't even 30 years old when they hired him. Was it 2018 on the heels of Montgomery leaving? So I think Oliver's older than that. I think he's in his 30s. So it would not have shocked me. I'm glad that we don't have to make that decision quite yet. Again, crossing fingers that Larson and Mankato don't hook up, so to speak. But
that's a
feel like
Minshew on Minshew crime there. You can't have exactly that.
So yeah, it's I would imagine they're going to maybe go in the junior ranks, get a head coach there. There is a Mankato blogger that's throwing out Pat Frischweiler's name. It's like that ain't going to happen. And I can't imagine them getting a current college coach, like plucking, like that's, you got to be a Big Ten type, big school to be able to do that.
The only one that I thought was maybe interesting was I did see somebody throw out Patolny as a name, but I feel like that would be.
It feels like a lateral move. Maybe Mankato's a step up from Northern Michigan, but it's the same
maybe in legacy, but scenery-wise, God, Northern UP is just so much better to look at than the 507.
And the other thing, too, is Patolny's been in Northern Michigan for like 8-9 years now, and to no NCAA tournament appearances. Yeah. It's not like he's been lighting the world on fire. And it's funny, too, like, because when he went to Northern,
there that long,
at least 8 years, maybe more, maybe 9. Hint, hint. But I know I don't want to scramble. There we go.
I'm sorry. I still have the tab up that Mankato and Madison is 4 hours and 41 minutes away, which I always
it's good.
I always forget how far south Madison is. It's like halfway down to Iowa, if you're looking latitude wise. Anyway, continue.
Yeah, it's weird how some of these, gaming out sort of coaching timelines. Like when Patolny got that job at Northern Michigan, I figured it was mainly for him to get a couple of years college experience until Lucia retired, and then Patolny would be hired by the Gophers.
6 years.
This was his 6th year.
This was his 6th year.
I feel like he's been there longer, but so
542 winning percentage. So if you would have, I would not have guessed that he's over 500.
I wouldn't have either. Maybe I sold him short because I said his tenure there hasn't been dazzling, but above 500, I would not have thought that. And made a couple of CCHA title games, but no appearances in the tournament yet. It's possible. Maybe it's one step closer to Minnesota, to the Gopher job because it's in the same state. But that's intriguing. I don't know if I buy into that
I don't
fully. Either. And like we were saying last week about Wisconsin probably being quick with his hire, probably I undersold the fact it would be this quick. I said maybe by at the end of shortly after the Frozen Four, but that's kind of how you got to handle it. I think in college these days with the transfer portal, you don't have the luxury to just string out a process because, as you said, you could hemorrhage not only current players but recruits in the transfer portal or have decommits.
Yeah, in a portal world, that's all the difference.
And so Mankato can't. They don't really have the luxury of waiting around and getting 10 guys in to interview and taking their sweet old time here, because by the time they do that, you might not have half the team still current on the roster. So I would assume this is going to happen pretty quick. Like I said, maybe 2 weeks. I said last week, 2 weeks maybe for Hastings or for Wisconsin to hire someone. Well, I'll shorten that. Maybe by the next podcast, Mankato has a coach. I wouldn't be shocked. Like I said, you need to act quick these days. So it'd be interesting to see how that plays out, and what direction they go.
Yep. So that's enough non-Husky talk. Let's get to Huskies, current Huskies, not former Huskies like Hastings. Except I wanted to bring out some former Huskies with Bushy and
some newly former Huskies. Or at that case too, the pro signings.
Yeah.
We had a couple of those.
Yeah, we got Bushy Spelsy. Both of those, they're playing in the ECHL right now in Kalamazoo. Spelsy got his first professional goal, so congratulations to him. And then Micah Miller for the Roadrunners. Are they in Tucson?
Tucson Roadrunners, the AHL affiliate of the Coyotes. A little surprised that he got an AHL deal, but good for him. Thrilled for him and thrilled for me because that means I can go watch him.
Oh, I didn't even put that together. I suppose, yeah, you're boom season ticket holder now. You're gonna just show up in your Huskies.
No, it's I've wanted to go to a game. I have not been to one of their games yet. And it's mostly because their schedule is similar to college hockey, where they play series on the weekends, either a 2 or sometimes I think they even play a 3-game series on the Friday, Saturday, and sometimes Sunday. They'll occasionally play a midweek game or a midweek series, but for the most part, the majority of their games are on the weekends, and that's kind of when I'm watching college hockey. So, but their last home series of the regular season, at least, is not this coming weekend, but the next weekend. And so I am planning on going to one of those games, putting on some St. Cloud State stuff, and maybe getting his attention and doing the shake of the shirt of the St. Cloud State shirt. See if he notices. Interesting to see. I don't know what to expect as far as atmosphere for these games. I mean, it's an AHL team. I think they get 5,000-6,000 per game ish. So interested to see what the vibe will be in the building, but I can't imagine anybody else there will show up with St. Cloud State gear on. So hoping to maybe find a friend in my new town, my fellow Tucsonian. So looking forward to rooting for him in person here very soon.
Sure enough. And then a scoop that I want to make sure 6 hours ago, I want to make sure to credit Al Appleby, the Huskies insider for Grant Crookshank.
Our favorite insider or neighborhood insider.
Grant Crookshank with the amateur tryout deal for the Marlies for the rest of the season and be a one-way AHL deal for 23-24. So I got Applebeed on that one. And so congratulations to Crookshank for getting that, for getting a contract as well.
Absolutely.
So, other people, former Huskies, probably, I mean, one for sure, obviously, Chase Brand, I guess, might come back, or it's
if you
an
go
option.
into the transfer portal.
It's not a one-way street.
That doesn't mean that you've left. That's not like
you're free to flirt is kind of what I like to say.
Because don't you have to do that for like the NBA draft? Like if you declare for the draft, that means you can't come back to college.
I think so.
I think that's right. It's not like that. Like if he doesn't get the interest that he's wanting from other teams, you can rescind that. You can deportal back to St. Cloud.
Unportal.
But yes, he is in the transfer portal and available, which was a little surprising to me. I mean, we talked about flight risks last week, and his name came up during looking at seniors and guys that could come back for fourth year. Just with him, I mean, it was a frustrating year for him because he had 3 of those like head hits. That none of them I think were called penalties.
I feel like he was like just a punching bag out there. Like
was
like Brand was on the receiving end of pretty much every bad hit throughout the season. It felt like, oh, of course it's Brand on the ground. It's kind of, I guess, how early seasons of South Park always killed off Kenny. I felt like that was kind of Brand. It's just like someone's on the ice. Oh, yep, it's probably Brand. So,
and he was, I think, missed some games.
Yeah, he missed quite a few
injuries,
games. Oh
yeah, injuries due to those hits. So didn't play a full season games wise. But at the same time, most of the guys you see in the transfer portal are guys that didn't quite get an opportunity. Brand, when he was in the lineup, got some pretty good opportunities.
He got arguably more opportunities than I thought he should have.
Right. Well, that coming down the stretch there, it was at least the Omaha series and the Duluth series to end the regular season where he was paired with Crandall and Okabe, which didn't make any sense to me after the first game. And then certainly after the fourth game, I'm like, because at that point, Crandall went ice cold. He wasn't producing because of this. Again, I'm not against changing things up, but that was not seemingly working even from the first game that you tried that.
And
but
then
again,
the last series, too, against Duluth, he was on that line as well.
Well, I said, was he playing that? But did they continue that into the playoff series?
Not into the playoff series.
That's that. I thought it was just those last two regular season series that they had that top three, which if you're going to, Crandall and Okabe, that line is, again, I'm doing quotes, top line. You can quibble over at some points in the line. The Crookshank line might have been your top line, but you can make an argument. He was playing on the top line for 2 weeks. And so it's hard for me to say that you shelved him and you didn't give him any sort of good opportunities to produce.
Just kind of going through the line charts from, in Denver as well, he was on the top line with Crandall and Okabe. So they like to mix it up sometimes, but that one was one where it didn't seem like it ever really clicked. No, it never really jived. So it wasn't. So it makes me wonder if, like, from a scholarship point of view, because he's a finance major, and it would be a grad.
Yes,
it would be a fifth year. So but
that's what I wish I would be able to get clarification on that, because as you said last week, when guys go in the portal, you can't automatically jump to conclusions based on why they did, and it could be something like this. Where I mentioned this about Anhorn last week. The problem there might be a major, their major that they currently have as an undergrad. If St. Cloud doesn't offer that as a graduate program, they're kind of SOL to continue on to St. Cloud. I don't know if you can change your major this late.
Well, you could go the Bobby Gephardt angle and just major in general studies. So
when I mentioned that Anhorn was liberal arts, I'm thinking maybe that's something like that, because again, liberal arts includes a lot of things, history and English and all those kind of things. But then again, maybe liberal arts, quote unquote, liberal arts major, maybe that is not offered as a grad track. And again, that might be the sticking point with Anhorn. I still have not heard any confirmation as whether or not he's coming back. Or
I keep refreshing Al Appleby's Twitter too. I keep trying to get to Al Appleby about an Anhorn scoop or a tray ball scoop, and I got nothing.
I'm surprised that we haven't heard
scoop. Nothing.
Yeah. So Mick Hatton had an article on the Rink Live last week.
Really good break.
Good article. Yep. Good article that showed all of the, not only the recruits that are in the pipeline, but I thought most importantly in that article, he mentioned these guys that have an option to come back for their fifth year.
Let's put a pin in this very quickly.
Okay.
And just go back, because we talked a lot about Brand. We should just also bring up Zemer, Brady Zemer, who did end up committing to Augustana, which was very heavily rumored on Twitter that that's where he would go. I think Bill Proud said that. Go Huskies Woo, I believe, said that. So I was kind of, it was kind of interesting that you heard a lot of that buzz that Augustana was on the top of the list. I was a fan of Zemer. It felt like I was more of a fan than you were of him, but with the emergence of Reiners and Wiley, it's a crowded blue line, and especially us not knowing what Trayball and Anhorn and where they're going to be. Zemer was still going to be kind of that odd person out. So I hope he has a really good couple of years there at Augustana.
Yeah, we mentioned that being a definite possibility as far as guys that didn't get regular action. Zemer's, once I remember when I brought that name up, you're like, yeah, that does make some sense. And Raboyne having a St. Cloud connection, he wouldn't have been on the St. Cloud staff, obviously, that brought Ziemer there. I don't think. But I don't think he would have had a hand in recruiting with the St. Cloud. But still, there's a natural sort of relationship there. So not surprising. And Augustana's, I saw in that Rink Live transfer portal spreadsheet that Schlossman and Wolf are compiling. They've already got 7 guys out of the portal, I believe. They're like one of the leaders. Them and Robert Morris, who's also coming back this year, which kind of both of those teams need to fill an entire roster. So they're going to be really active in picking guys up through the transfer portal this year. And so good opportunity for him, staying somewhat close to home and in a situation where you can probably get top 2, top 4 pairing minutes for Augustana. So yeah, it's best of luck to Brady Ziemer.
So I totally interrupted you. Mick Hatton.
No, it was good to put a period in my first sentence that I interrupted myself on. But yeah,
our
so
podcast is just a series of run-on sentences. Yeah. I don't know how anybody keeps any of this straight.
It's very difficult to follow.
The transcript is just a bunch of just gobbledygook.
Yes. So McHatton reports that, first of all, that all 4 of the drafted players are planning on returning. So that checks off Bassey, Peart, which we knew based on the reportage of our favorite neighborhood insider, Al Appleby. And then
we got Applebeed on that one. I tell you what.
Sure did. Now we got Hattoned. Hattoned and then Applebeed and then Hattoned. So all 4 of those drafted players, I mean, you had mentioned you were kind of 50-50 on Bassey, but according to Hatton here, all 4 of these guys that we all touched on last week, Miettinen, Ingram, at least I had confidence that the 3, other than Peart, which we knew was coming back based on Appleby, but the other 3, I was fairly 75% plus confident that they're all coming back, and sounds like that's going to be the case. So important nugget there. And then also the guys that could come back for a 5th year, other than Brand, who we just mentioned is in the transfer portal, but the others, Kupka, according to Hatton, it's Kupka, Okabe, and Kupka, he says, is planning on returning. Okabe and Anhorn are weighing whether to sign or return for another season, sign a pro contract. And then he says Treyball and Cranola are both expected to sign a pro contract. So according to him, it's Treyball and Cranola most likely out, which I didn't think that on about Treyball. Cranola, I expected I was less than 50-50 that he would return. Makes sense that he doesn't come back. Treyball, a little bit more surprising, but not shocking. I mean, any of these 5th-year guys, I don't even really blame them. I mean,
exactly.
You came here under the impression that you're going to give them 4 years, and getting a 5th year, it can be a tough ask, especially with European guys that are playing so far away from home to begin with. So I'd love to have them both back, all of these guys. But when you're factoring that into the scenario, I'm not really going to hold it against them. This wouldn't be something where I'm like, oh, they're leaving too early. They've been here. They've given 4 years, and if they want to give a 5th, great. But according to Hatton, doesn't appear that Treyball and Cranola will be back, which again, not terribly surprising. Having Kupka back, that's not terribly surprising either, and a good surprise, or a good non-surprise, I should say, to have him back for a 5th year. And then, as we mentioned, Anhorn and Okabe, especially with Anhorn there, would be a big decision on whether or not they come back as well. But at least interpreting that article, I think it would have been maybe that's some answer about Anhorn's eligibility, at least, because you think that if it was a grad school issue or he's eligible but not at St. Cloud State. You figured that would have been part of the article, whereas what Hatton's saying here is it's basically between signing a pro deal and coming back. So again, I would imagine, I'm almost surprised that we didn't hear more confirmation on whether or not these guys are coming back before today's show. Just again, with the pace that everything moves nowadays, maybe it's the Frozen Four, because you still have 4 teams. I saw that Quinnipiac landed a guy in the portal today.
Yeah, I saw that.
I'm like, boy, you don't get any sleep.
No rest for the wicked, right?
But those guys, I'm sure you're going to have guys from those teams, a guy like Pino Niemi, who we just mentioned. Like, that would be like a prime candidate for me. I would figure that he might go into the transfer portal. There's going to be some other guys from those 4 teams that are going to enter the portal. And then I think after that, it'll go pretty quick after that. Because I think the portal closes. At least you need to be in it by the beginning of May. And then I think there's another month or 2 where you can settle on or find a landing spot, and then it'll close eventually too. It doesn't go on all summer. It's a relatively short window that this is in, but hopefully by next week we'll have some more clarification on who exactly is coming back, who's not going to be back, because as we're going to get into here, the potential recruits coming in, the numbers, it'll all depend on who is on this roster and who's not, how many slots you have available. So any comment on these guys that I mentioned, not only seeing that it sounds like the drafted players are going to all be back, and then also potentially losing Trable and Crandall. Any comment, surprised or intrigued about any of these rumblings?
I think Cronulla, again, I'm worried about our lack of centers, and Cronulla leaving. If that is the case, I do also, that kind of makes sense. Is going to be a little bit of a sting, but that also is going to maybe open the door for Werner Miettinen, who is VT's brother, to come in, who is a center, to kind of slot in and just be kind of a natural pairing as well. And that might have also kind of played a little bit of a, how shall I say, like, reason, I guess, for Miettinen to come back and not sign pro. Again, being junior and having that extra, or, usually drafted players, want to have that kind of security, because if you go too far after the draft and not signing them, they're a free agent. But I also don't know how much VT might be even on their radar, really, as a prospect. Toronto's prospect pool is pretty deep. Maybe that's just kind of free money, so they're just kind of like, we'll let them kind of free reign out there, and maybe it's not even a big priority for them, for Toronto to even sign him. So Trable, he's always been just kind of a steady defender back there. He'll be missed for his experience, but I do think that's going to be kind of a place where, again, we got some good, talented young D to slot in. I don't think we're going to miss. Obviously, I would like him to come back, but I don't think we'll miss too much of a step if he does end up leaving.
Yeah, so do we want to talk about some of these recruits? Now, you mentioning that Werner Miettinen plays center intrigues me, because that's like the one downside I see of, like, McHatton has a running table with recruits and their stat lines and everything, but that, and then like the transfer portal too, it just says forward, F for forward, D for defense. It doesn't distinguish between centers and forwards, which, again, if you're a forward, it's taking a draw. Anyone can do that. It's not like you're a pitcher in baseball. It's such a specialized position that You need to have a separate position designated by your name. But it does help this conversation to know. So if you've done some digging as far as which of these guys play center, Mick has it, I think, in his detailed write-up here from last week. Some of the recruits, at least, he'll mention that they'll play some center.
Yeah,
I believe.
Yeah, that's where I got it for Werner being a center. And also going through. If you follow, I believe it's USHL on Twitter, sometimes they'll go on like a retweet spree of just line charts of before the games.
Okay.
And it'll have like college commitments on there. So I'll kind of see who plays where and whatnot, who's on those lines together. So I get kind of a good idea, like Barrett Hall usually plays left wing, things along those natures. So
good. Well, that'll help us inform this discussion then.
Now you're just putting me on the spot. Now I'm nervous.
Well, I mean, we're not exactly flying blind here, but a lot of this depends on, again, the numbers on how many guys are going to be available to come in. But there's some of the hints that we can get is just looking at the age. So if you're playing juniors, you can't play juniors past the age of 20. I think if you start the season at 20, but you could, I think, end the season at 21. But essentially, juniors are 16 to 20 years old. So if you're 20 years old,
extra year for NAHL.
It's possible. I know for USHL, it's 20.
USHL is 20. I think it's 21 for NAHL.
You might be right, but and it depends on like when your birthday is versus the season, I think too. So that might be a little confusing, but essentially, if you're looking at,
I'm sure Euro is going to text me and tell me how I'm wrong at everything because he works with the Norsemen. So
that's right. Yeah, he could inform us on our ignorance here. But you look at the table that Mick Hatton compiles regarding the prospects or the recruits in the pipeline right now. You look at guys that are 20 years old as a good gauge as far as these are going to be the most likely guys to come in. There's always a possibility that they, maybe they flame out in juniors and they don't make it to campus. God, who was the guy? Was it Mitch Slattery? You remember him?
Oh, yeah.
He was a Hill Murray guy. Ended up going to Northern, I think, with Patulny. But he had some hype coming out of Hill Murray and then just sort of face planted in juniors. I think he started in USHL, then down to NA, and then St. Cloud never was interested. They lost interest.
Yeah.
And so sometimes recruits will do that.
And I think
just because they're listed as a current recruit now, it doesn't mean they're going to come in. But
if I
based on what we got here
correctly, Mitch Slattery had like a really good tournament in the high school hockey when he was with Hill Murray.
I think that's right.
I think he had like a really good championship, or
I remember it was kind of a good get.
Yeah.
For Motzko at that time. Like this guy looks like he's something, but just never really materialized for him. But based on the guys we got now, at least the 20-year-olds, I'm thinking that it's a good chance that we see all of these guys. There's 4 20-year-olds right now that listed on the commitment sheet. And I think a decent chance that we see all of these guys in the fall. And you're talking about centers. We can start with Jack Ryman, 20 years old, from Ham Lake. Been with a couple of USHL teams this year. I think it means based on there's Muskegon, Sioux Falls, and then Des Moines listed in that order, so I'm going to guess he's currently at Des Moines.
He's currently at Des Moines, and he plays on a line usually with Cupco.
Lubomir
Cupco.
Yes, because that's another guy that I was just going to get to, another 20-year-old. That's good. See, you've done more show prep than me, and I'm glad. But based on Hatton's writing, Ryman plays center on that line.
Yep.
In Des Moines. And we're talking about a dearth of centers he's not putting up great numbers, 15 points this year in 45 games. But you mentioned he's playing with this Lubomir Kupko, who's having a pretty decent year, 29 points in 43 games, 15 goals mixed in there. So maybe he is, helping to feed him. Good line mates. Yeah, we can pair these two together because playing on the same USHL team currently, that might mean that they may have some built-in chemistry coming in for next fall. Perhaps we could see them on a line.
Yep. And Hatton's write-up also said good on a face-off dot. So maybe
on a face-off dot.
Spellacy type.
Spellacy or our favorite Salquist.
Salquist.
So we got that possibility. So those are two of the 20-year-olds. Kupko, I should mention, that's going to be great. Got probably a Kupka and a Kupko. That's not going to cause Jim Rich any problems.
Jason Bryant's going to have to make sure he knows which emphasis for the Kupka and the Kupko. See, even I'm confused now. I don't.
Yeah, it could be like a Slovakian, the C might be a ch sound. And I still don't know if it's Kupka or Kupka. I think I've been 50-50 saying it both ways.
I don't know if it's Kranila or Kranila. We don't want to go down this pronunciation road.
We are all of our bring up here.
Nope. I've already fielded enough complaints that we hammer that too much. So let's move past.
By the way, the ESPN guys, they're like, oh yeah, we asked Jack Peart if he'd ever heard of Neil Peart, and they pronounced it Peart. I'm like, I swear Rush drummer guy is Pert. That's the only way I've ever heard that name pronounced. Now I'm going nuts. Like, I gotta figure out how Neil Peart. We gotta find
dead,
out.
Isn't he?
He is dead,
so,
but
don't worry about it.
I'm not letting this one die because this whole Peart, whatever, it's driving me nuts.
All right.
Other 20-year-olds. Tyson Gross, Cedar Rapids in the USHL. 36 points, most of that in assists with Cedar Rapids. Calgary kid. Seems to be somewhat of a pipeline for them. I think Shayak's got some inroads there in the Calgary area. I believe that's where Kupka, Speak of the Devil, is from originally. And so you got that Alberta connection. Ingram as well, as he Manitoba, one of the prairie provinces. I'm pretty sure Shayak has been the main recruiter of that geographic area. So another Calgarian in the pipeline, and so looking like he's good chance of coming in here. And then the other 20-year-old is this Caleb Tyson. I think we mentioned him last year when the commit was announced. They committed him out of one of the minor Canadian junior leagues. I think it's maybe the OJHL, the Ontario Junior Hockey League, which is also where they got that James Gray. And I believe that's where he was at. This year he played in the NAHL for Maryland, the East Coast version or conference or division or whatever of that league. 20-year-old the defenseman, as I mentioned, seems like he's a big sort of physical type defenseman.
6'5".
And Gross as well, as we just mentioned, 6'3", $180 on him too. So it's nice to see some bigger size guys. We'll talk about Leo Gruba, who I think is going to come in as well. He's got some size to him as well. So yeah, and this, according to Hatton, just 20 years old, and he is playing the NA. So maybe this is a factor where we're talking about NA eligibility. He said Tyson's in his last season of junior eligibility, and he's currently in the NAHL. So I don't know if that's universal, because he played in the Canadian juniors, if that throws a wrench into things, not sure. But puts up he's not an offensive force, but he's put up a decent amount of points this year at juniors, and but he's more of a physical presence. He's maybe thinking about replacing guys. Maybe he's your new Bushy.
Yeah.
and maybe that's what we can expect out of him. So based on the 20-year-olds, I'd say these 4 are very likely to come in next year. Looking at 19-year-olds, or at least maybe the non-20-year-olds. I guess we should mention first, because it's listed here as 21 years old in the NAHL. Again, there is that. I think the rule is you got to be. I think the cutoff is New Year's Eve. So if you don't turn 21 before December 31st of that year, then I think you can. So then if you turn 21 after that, but in that same season, I think you're still eligible to play. It might be something like that, but they're listing this Isaac Posh, goaltender, at 21. And thinking about goaltenders, he was in the system. He's been committed for a couple of years now. He played last year in the USHL and did not have a great season stats-wise. But I remember, I think it was Sioux Falls.
Yeah, it was
Sioux
Sioux
maybe
Falls.
One of the Sioux was not a very good team.
Well, they were abysmal.
And so that had perhaps some effect on the ugliness, relatively speaking, of his numbers last year. So stepped down a level in juniors this year and went to the NAHL with the Minnesota Wilderness. That's the one up in like Cloquet. Is that right?
Yep.
I know there's 2 Minnesota teams. I think one's in the cities and one's in the Cloquet area. And so having a good year there. I mean, .925 save percentage and a .217 goals against. Again, at a lower level than the USHL, but we've seen NAHL. That's like Duluth's feeder league for goalies.
Yeah, I mean, there's only such limited goalie positions. So going down to the NAHL and playing goalie there, it's if you can stop a puck anywhere, I mean, they're going to find you. So,
and so with Castor gone, no more eligibility for him. And it sounds like Bassey is going to be back.
Mm-hmm.
And we're expecting him to be the main starter next year.
Yep.
We saw him this year pretty much all until, well, I mean, he was even, it's almost hard to remember that the first 2 games of the Duluth playoff series, Bassey started.
Yeah.
And going into game 3, I remember texting a buddy, who do you go and go net tonight? And I said, well, they didn't pull Bassey in game 2, which I thought they should have. If they didn't pull him then, I'd assume he's starting. But Castor got the net, and we never looked back. And for good reason, because Castor really ended his career with a great run there, ending in the regional final. But so if he was a 50-50 goalie for the majority of this year, it's going to be more like a 75-80 20 split, something like that.
I do feel Brett now. I think last year kind of scarred Brett by hitching just one and then riding it. Now I do feel 70%, 75%, is probably going to be a little bit more common here on out. But I think it's just too much of a risk to have a goalie start 90-95% of your starts. So I do feel like if Posh comes in, there's going to be a battle between Posh and Gray to have that second rotating in kind of a scenario.
Yeah, you mentioned James Gray. He's your other guy still on roster, who I think they must think highly of because they kept the red shirt on him this year. Mentioned they got him from one of those, I think it was the Ontario Junior Hockey League, but did not see any action this year. We sort of got confirmation of that after the mid-season exhibition game, which I figured would be Gray's Super Bowl, but did not play a minute in that. And then it was, I think, shortly after it was kind of confirmed he's going to keep the red shirt on this year. And with Pasha 21 coming in, you wonder if they're going to try to do a similar thing, like see if they can not play. I don't know if you can. It's like, again, I don't know if there's an age restriction. Castor is 26, but he had the COVID year in there too. I don't know if you can redshirt a 21-year-old freshman and then
I don't think so.
Start.
I think I think by then you have to. You start burning years. I don't think I think 25 is the cutoff.
Right. 25 used to be the cutoff, but I think it's the COVID kind of threw stuff off.
Yeah, he would be affected by the COVID anyway.
Right. So, yeah. Gray wouldn't, correct. Or Posh, obviously. So, it's possible that even if you put the red shirt on him or not, it's possible that could just be Bassey and Gray that get action. We'll see. Maybe Posh is just a token third stringer, but I don't know. I mean, you kind of want to see what you got there, I think. At least, if you have an exhibition game, if they play one to start the year this year, I would be surprised if we see all three of them get action in that. I kind of like the idea of having a exhibition game to start the year. I think the problem there, at least it was this year, is that October 1st, you can't play any games before October 1st. I bet they get a preseason exhibition game this year, because last year the first was Saturday. That's why they played St. Thomas Saturday, Sunday, because it was the 1st and the 2nd of October. 1st of October this year is a Sunday, so meaning the first weekend would be the 6th and 7th. So, if I'm going to put my money on it, they're going to play an exhibition game that Sunday.
On Sunday, that makes sense.
So if they play something like that, you probably get one period each for all three of the goalies if they're planning on not redshirting Posh. Because that was the other thing. I thought that an exhibition game didn't count towards redshirting, but clearly it did, because they didn't want to put Gray in any action. Whether or not you're going to redshirt Posh or not, you're going to see some Gray this year, I think. And again, he's another intriguing prospect too. He always put up very good numbers in that Canadian League, which was, again, you wonder how much stock he put into it, because especially from St. Cloud's perspective, I think maybe more Eastern teams recruit out of that league, but we just haven't seen St. Cloud dip into that league as much. But as I mentioned, Tyson also coming from that league, or having experience last year in that league. Interesting to see what these guys can bring to the table. So assuming that Posh is going to be brought in, seems, I mean, if he doesn't, then we're probably picking a guy up in the portal. But I would assume he's going to be coming in.
Yeah, he'll be coming in, I think.
Barring any unforeseen activity, those will be your three goaltenders on roster next year. So then these other guys, thinking of, let me pair these guys together, Leo Gruba and Barrett Hall. Because I remember last year, right around this time, maybe May of last year, their commitments were announced fairly close together. And it seemed like these guys were sort of late bloomer, maybe not late bloomer necessarily, but guys that had skated under the radar until last year, were unrecruited until, like I said, around this time last year. But then since then, their stock has really risen. Hall ended up getting drafted in the summer last year, and there was rumors that Gruba could as well. He still could be drafted this year. Both of those guys, they were recruited out of the NAHL last year. This year, they spent full seasons in the USHL, which again is another indication of their rising stock as a prospect. And they both had really good seasons in the USHL. Hall puts up a 40-point season, or is putting up a 40-point season with Green Bay. Gruba, 20-point season. Again, he's a defenseman, plus 19. And I said 20 points with Fargo. There's that Nick Oliver connection with Gruba and Werner Miettinen there. And I think both of these guys are coming in based on, they seem to be some of their top recruits at this point. And it seemed like they stepped up to a higher level this year, going from NA to USHL, and made the transition quite well. And so now making another step up into college, that's another big jump. But these two guys are maybe my most intriguing prospects to watch. And, so I would assume they're both coming in. What do you think? I know we're kind of going off with one's a defenseman, one's a forward, but just based on the hype that they have seemingly garnered over the last year, I think it's fitting to sort of lump these two together. What are your thoughts on these two?
Yeah, it's especially Barrett Hall kind of coming in, getting drafted. I was, yeah, he was really on no one's radar. So seeing that and how well, he put up fairly pedestrian numbers in the NHL in Cloquet, where but only played 19 games. So I guess that's probably a difference there. 20 points I saw, but I didn't see it in 19 games. Okay, that makes sense. But yeah, 40 points in 49 games right now with the USHL. So, just kind of doing a numbers game then, because we got to replace 4 forwards. We got to replace 3 defense. Yeah,
and you're counting Trable gone.
I'm not. Since it's not official, I haven't counted it. So
let's just say at least 3 defensemen.
So yeah. So at least Bushy, Meyer, and Zemer, Spalacy, Cruikshank, Brandon, Miller for forwards. Now Cronulla, we can add that to the list if we feel like he's going to go, and then also, as you said, with Trey Ball as well. So then we're looking at 5 and 4.
Did you factor Brandon to that, to the exiting players as well?
Okay. Yep. So just looking at numbers and looking at the pipeline, it's, we were talking about Ryman as well. Being a center, I could, he's probably going to come in. Miettinen's probably going to come in. And then Hall, he coming in. Then it's kind of where you're at, who's going to take another year of eligibility for juniors. And then obviously there's kind of, Gavin Thorson, who is kind of the big gem from what he was able to do in Andover. Him only being 18, I can imagine he's going to do another year in USHL, but I mean, he's been really doing incredibly well so far. And then with Austin, Bernovic playing with the under 18 team, he's a big body guy who can shoot, who played Totino Grace, Thor Bufflin from Roseau. So I mean, we got quite the pipeline here going, and that's Larson's going to have quite a juggling act, and that's a lot of also managing expectations and talking to players, who is going to to tell them that they're going to need another year of juniors and whatnot, and who knows if they like that answer, Right. So that's always the tough kind of aspect, and why Larson gets paid the big bucks.
Yeah, it's the juggling act, You get a guy like Bernovic, mentioned him in the with the U18 team right now. He's young, he's 18, but 30 plus points for the U18s, and they play such a weird schedule. We'll play USHL competition, and then they'll also play college exhibition games versus college teams. With guys like that, it's like you might want to keep them back, but keeping them in juniors for another year, and them being somewhat of a high profile player at the U18 at the National Team Development Program, maybe you're playing some politics there and saying maybe we'll bring him in a year early, because that way he's not going to want to decommit, go somewhere else that will give him minutes right away. Mm-hmm. Same with Thorson. I would agree with you that I think that they would prefer him to get a full year in juniors.
Now, I want to say Thorson did sign. I saw that he signed a national letter of intent, so we do have a little bit of wiggle room there.
Yeah, and he's not really struggling in the USHL.
No,
we see like a guy like Ingram, different situation from him, but similar as well, and he was putting up great numbers in juniors, and we saw this year it was it was a lot of promise, but it was a lot of struggles as well. Mm-hmm. And I don't know. Do I expect if Gavin Thorson comes in this fall that he's going to put up I don't know, you fill in the blank 30-point season? I would feel like that's doubtful. And I would like to think that a full year in juniors would mean that he could come in 2024, and then maybe we can expect like a Jackson Blake, Ryan McAllister type of freshman season. But at the same time, if you think he's ready for that next year, don't waste any time. Bring him in. That's where the coaching staff has to. That's where they earn their money, their paycheck, because they're at a much better position to make these decisions than Schmuck on a podcast is. But that's going to be a big juggling act. It's you can't just treat these guys as it's like you're putting eggs in an incubator and you just want to keep them there, and because they'll always be there. Like these guys have options as well, and so there's always constantly moving wheels, and you have to decide when's the best time and when to pull the trigger, and that can be a difficult needle to thread. But so if we're saying, what did you say? We definitely have 3 defensemen, 5 forwards to fill.
4 forwards, 3 defensemen, not including Cronulla and Trable.
Okay, so if we start with kind of penciling in the 20-year-olds, the 4 that we had there, Gross, Kupko, Ryman, and Tyson. We got 3 forwards and 1 defense out of that. And if we're confident about Hall and Gruba coming in, that's our 4th forward and our 2nd defenseman out of that. If we're going to stretch it to 5 because we're thinking Crannell, then maybe that brings in Werner Miettinen. We feel like he's competent. We're confident that he's going to be coming in.
I feel, yeah. I mean, we need centers.
Right. And if we're thinking that Trable might be gone too, that leaves 4 open spots for defense, which would mean both Thor Bufflin, who you mentioned, related to, what was it? Second cousin to Dustin?
Yep.
And Warren Clark, again, 2 of the tall trees that we're planting. Those are your other 2 defensemen currently in the system that are reasonable to bring in next year. There's, like I said, that Henricks from California is defenseman, but he's 16. So those would be your 4D that are coming in, and we've just listed 5 forwards that are coming in. Now that's not mentioning Lavins, who I think is a decent chance of coming in, and that's not including Bernovic or Thorson. It's not including Agutter, who at 19 is older than some of these guys that we've mentioned. But so I would say the ones that we listed there, as far as Gruba, Tyson, for sure for the defense, I think are coming in. Bufflin and Clark, may not see both of them. Probably you'll see one of them. And as far as the forwards go, Gross, Ryman, Kupko, and then I'd say Hall and Miettinen as being the most likely 5 to come in, with then Lavins, Agutter, and Bernovic / Thorson as your less likely options. And again, this could all change based on bringing more recruits in or less based on their activity in the portal. Which, if they pick guys up, which is not, I would not be shocked. I mean, Larson has liked to get some, especially veteran depth, through the portal in the past. And again, there's always a possibility of further players either entering the portal, current players for the Huskies, or guys turning pro as well. So, did you have anything else? Like, what do you think about the list I just gave as far as like the 5 that I think are pretty good locks to come in? 5 forwards and 3D. What did you have anything else to add there?
I mean, I think we kind of nailed it. And again, what we have to look at, and what we do look at, or I do look at, is spreadsheets and charts. I mean, it's nothing more than that. I have never watched any of these guys play. I've seen highlight clips, which obviously can be misleading, but I've
seen Thorson play.
At the
high school level.
At the high school, so
different beast than the USHL.
So exactly. So it's a guessing game right now. That's kind of who I think that's a good bet on who we think is going to be kind of coming through. So, that's kind of a preview of kind of what to look for. I would say in the next couple of months when it comes to news about potential portals or transfers / incoming freshmen.
Freshmen. We'll get some recruiting, like new recruits too. As I mentioned last year with Hall and Grubo were picked up right around this time, and there is no off season for college coaches, and this is a especially busy time of year. You got like the postseason for the junior leagues. Like the Robertson Cup for the NHL. That's just like a coaches convention essentially. Just all kinds of coaches will just go there and do offer some recruits some spots at that time and just see if they can seal the deal with recruits there or finally see guys in person, that kind of thing. So the next month or two, not only with the portal but with future recruits, very busy time of year, and we'll keep you as apprised as we can when we get that news. We'll pass it along. But it's exciting to look forward to next year. But it is.
I'd rather look forward to the Frozen Four with the Huskies in it. So, but that's next year. That'll be next year. So
that's right.
So I guess here we are. Sitting at hour 10-ish. Somewhere in that range. Where do you want to go? Do you want to talk maybe predictions of Frozen Four? Do you want to talk about
you mentioned the Frozen Four. We'll get to Hobey. You mentioned Frozen Four. Let's get that out of the way.
Perfect.
Sort of the cap on this year's college hockey season. Tampa Bay hosting another Frozen Four. We got BU and Minnesota in the early game on Thursday, and then we have Michigan and Quinnipiac. It's
just going to throw Bob Motzko off. It's going to be just...
At least it's not the 8:30 game, because that's just... It's just not going to happen. So I saw some interesting betting lines. Vegas does not like BU in this matchup.
It's really surprising to me.
And I can't remember, but I'm pretty sure I'm not as I don't remember the exact line for the Quinnipiac Michigan game, but from what I remember, they don't really like Quinnipiac either. I think I might put some money on BU in particular. But maybe I'm starting to think like maybe I'm just it's my anti-Gopher bias that makes me not like them in these matchups. But as we mentioned, BU is playing very well right now. 9-game winning streak coming into this game, and got a really good player in Lane Hudson as their star player. But going up against not one but two Hobey finalists with the Gophers. Again, we'll get to the Hobey discussion a little bit later, but spoiler alert, Cooley and Nyes both made the cut for the Hobey hat trick, and that it was just too bad that the Hobey hat trick can't be 7 guys, because it would be six Gophers and then
6 Gophers and Fantilli.
If Gopher fans would have their way. This is just a stack lineup. This is the 78, 79 Canadians. I don't even know if that was one of their. I think they won the cup that year. If you go with like any year before 1980. And you'd be like, who won the cup that year? Like a 90% chance it was the Canadians. But these Gophers, man, they're just God's gift to hockey. What chance do you give the Terriers in this matchup? Because I'm going to put like $10 on them in this game.
Oh, I would I really like their chances. I would even say it's more than 50%. I think Boston can play lockdown defense a lot better than they have than obviously Canisius, but even better than St. Cloud can. I know Western Michigan wasn't playing their best hockey, but I mean, we've seen what that offense can do throughout the season and really limiting, really anything for Western Michigan. Only one goal. I, I don't know. I really like Boston's team. I like their makeup, and they're just able to win close, tight games. They're able to get into a shootout and run up the score. They had that 9-6 game against Maine earlier this year, and they're able to win 2-1, 2-0. It's. I think they're a little bit more adaptable, and I think they're going to be able to shut down the Gophers. That's my prediction, and yes, I would put money on that.
Another interesting matchup in goal for this game. Again, we sort of are on the Magnus Krona side when it comes to Justin Close for the Gophers. Guy's been putting up great numbers, better than Krona numbers. $1.99 goals against, elite save percentage. And then you got Drew Comesso on the other side for BU. I mean, he's a guy that's World Juniors. Always been like one of the highest ranked college goalies as far as like pro prospects go. Huskies lit him up in the NCAAs a couple of years ago. But he's been coming into his own here, playing very well. I would tend to give him the edge in net, even though the stats definitely favor Close. But I think that could be a deciding factor in this game is goaltending. I see a close game either way. I don't think this is going to be a 3 or 4 goal deficit type of game from either side, whoever wins. And so, I do think it's going to be closer than maybe what the odds makers expect. And I do think that Boston has a good chance here. How about in the late game, Quinnipiac and Michigan? Now, when I did the Whiskey Dave bracket, I had Quinnipiac winning the whole thing, and I believe I would have to check. I know I had BU in the Frozen Four. I know I had St. Cloud there. I can't remember who I had winning the St. Cloud BU game. I did a second bracket where I had BU winning the whole thing. And whereas I'm probably rooting for BU and Quinnipiac in these two games, something tells me, again, it's like Big Ten. I'm just lower on the Big Ten than what reality is. And looking at this Michigan-Quinnipiac matchup, I think Quinnipiac can certainly play with them and can beat Michigan. Michigan is not a perfect team, but I do feel like Michigan has a talent edge here. And it would be hard for me to think that the Big Ten is going to get shut out in this Frozen Four, meaning that they would lose both games, not literally shut out, but that they would go 0-2 in these matchups. And I guess I would feel more confident with Michigan over Quinnipiac than I would Minnesota over BU. So I think I'm going to go against my Whiskey Dave bracket, and I'm going to pick Michigan in this game. What about you? I'm going to go Quinnipiac. I'm going to be a Big Ten hater, and I think the difference is going to go down in goal. And I think Quinnipiac has the goaltending edge there, and like you said, not a perfect team is Michigan. So that's where I think Quinnipiac, hungry, and they've got some experience on their side as well. So that's I'm going Quinnipiac that game. This will be a revenge tour for Quinnipiac and Peretz, their goaltender in particular, who they met in the regional final in Allentown last year. Obviously, that was when St. Cloud played Quinnipiac. And the story there was St. Cloud, Peretz coming into that game. What did he have? 12 shutouts last year as a freshman, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then St. Cloud puts 4 goals on him. And then Michigan does the same. I can't remember how many goals he allowed, but he was pulled in that game, in that regional final, by Michigan. Now, there's been a lot of turnover in the Michigan roster from last year to this year, but certainly several guys that do have experience playing Quinnipiac and shooting on Peretz. So perhaps that gives Michigan the advantage as far as they know how to beat him, but that also maybe gives Peretz that much more motivation to pull a caster and stick it to Michigan.
I forgot about that game. Michigan was up 4-rip, and then the third period, Quinnipiac scores 3 goals to make it interesting at 4-3. That's right.
When did they pull Peretz? Was it
after
4-0? So
yep. Was
it St. Cyr? But he ended up giving up or did they score a couple of empty netters? Because it wasn't 7-4 or 7-3 was the final.
Yeah. St. Cyr gave up 1, but that was after 2 empty net goals by Michigan.
So it was 4-3. They pulled him, scored 2 empty netters to make it 6-3, and then
6-3.
Put him back in, and then they
put
still
him back
scored
in.
another one.
They scored another one to make it 7-3, and then after that, Quinnipiac scored to make it 7-4, and that's how it ended.
Oh wow! But so he gave up all 4 in the first period, in one period of action.
No, first 2 in the first, 2 in the second.
Oh, okay. So it was like halfway through the game that they pulled him. So
4 goals on 19 shots.
Maybe he's got and that's the whole kind of ding against Peretz and people that say he puts up these great numbers, but he's like Dryden McKay. He sees very few shots throughout the year. Most of his ECAC games it's not just the opponents he's playing, but the defensive structure that Quinnipiac has. It's usually he's only seeing maybe an average of 15 to 18 shots a game. He's still got to make those saves, and he does.
He got a shutout this year against Yale by stopping 5. Yale had 5 shots on goal, and
was that in Yale's infamous 4-game plus shutout or like scoreless drought?
Nope. That was on March.
It was a separate one.
That was March 10th.
Oh, that was in the playoffs then.
So,
wow.
Yeah, that was in the ECAC tournament. They lost. So it's. I
mean, that's an extreme example, but I mean, it is,
and it's not like we talked about Yale and how they weren't able to score a goal for the longest.
So he's going to be seeing much more than 5 shots in this game.
A little bit,
for Michigan. But yeah, so you're going to take Quinny, and I'll take Michigan in that game. So that means we both have BU.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to take BU in that game. So you got BU versus Quinnipiac. I got BU versus Michigan. Who do you got as a champion?
I got BU. And I just think they've impressed me. So, and granted, I didn't, only watch the 2 games with them, but I think they can win both ways. And, I was really impressed with, and of course, I'm blanking on his name, Hudson. And I was really impressed with him on the back end. I think he's going to be, coming from, again as a freshman too, coming right from the under 18 team, Montreal draft pick. I think that's a heck of a player. And I think he might be a little bit too much to overcome.
Yeah, I would definitely root for them. I mean, if Quinnipiac makes it, I might root for them because they've never won a title, and it feels like they've always been at the doorstep. This will be the second time.
Just like St. Cloud, which is why I don't want them to win.
That's true.
That's
one way to look at it.
2 times that we have been eliminated by them.
Yeah.
So no, I'm not on the Quinnipiac train.
We've got to win against BU in the tournament. We're 1-1 against BU in the tournament. I think it's year 2000. The year 2000, they lost to BU in that year. But that's a good way to think of it. So if I got Michigan and BU, I'm looking at they've actually played each other this year. In way back in early October is actually the first road game, second game for Pandolfo total, first road game. Michigan won 9-2 against BU. BU comes back the next day and beats them 3-2, and in Ann Arbor, and that's impressive. I mean, it's not impressive to lose 9-2, but to pick yourself off the mat the very next day and to score a key road win like that, early indication that this team, it was different than they had been in years past under their previous regime.
I just don't see the game where where Boston or Michigan goes on the power play 9 times.
Yeah, and that game.
So
and scoring how many goals?
9 times.
Thank you. I don't want to burn out the circuit there.
So I mean, they had 3 goals on a 5-on-3.
On a 5-on-3 in the first period. So yes, I mean that's one case study in looking at one result and how it can be a little deceiving. But that said, I mean, obviously it's a data point to consider. I suppose we could have the possibility of having another Minnesota-Michigan matchup. Bet you that's what ESPN's salivating about, that possibility. But the other matchups, Quinnipiac, Minnesota, or BU and Quinnipiac, those teams have not played each other this year. So it would be interesting to get a rematch of a previous matchup this year. So if I'm thinking Michigan BU, again, I think I took BU in this bracket. I'm going to take Michigan in somewhat of a reverse jinx fashion.
All right.
Because in that specific case, I would definitely root for BU. So I'm going to go Michigan, and hopefully that jinxes them.
Perfect. Love it. We talked a little bit about the Hobey. The Hobey hat trick was announced, and that anytime that the Hobey hat trick and the Hobey Baker Memorial Award gets brought up, that gives Adam Woden a chance to get on his soapbox and just scream into the void and really troll for clicks. And he did that really to a T again this year, as he was. He has a problem with the character categorization of the Hobey Baker Award. And Gopher fans had their theories and their thoughts about splitting the vote, even though it doesn't work like that. Like, when I say it doesn't work like that, like, the voting's done. Like, these are just the top 3 vote getters. So it's not like these vote getters now are choosing between Cooley and Knives and which one are they going to pick. That's already done. So
I mean, it's a possibility that they already split the vote between them, as it is right now, as is how the final vote was. It's possible that was a factor in that, but that's the least compelling part of this dust up, as you mentioned. So Fantilli, did we mention that? Fantilli was obviously the other nominee or finalist, along with.
We probably mentioned that early in the podcast, but no, I don't think I mentioned it just now. Yes.
Yeah. If you're listening to this podcast, I think you know.
You know.
You think you know.
You don't need us to tell. You've seen Woden tweet about it.
Or write articles.
Or
rant on his podcast.
Or rehash articles from 2013. I think it all just stems from the fact that Christo wasn't a finalist. I think everything comes back to the fact that Danny Christo was not.
Well, it goes beyond that because it was Matt Fratton too. He had a bug up his butt about that when Mealy beat him.
He didn't beat him in a lawnmower throwing competition, did he?
No comment.
Oh, for people who aren't aware, Matt Frenton threw a lawnmower when he was drunk in North Dakota. Allegedly. Sorry.
And what was Christo's
frostbite? He got drunk and passed out on a porch, I think, in Fargo, or I'm sorry, not in Fargo, in Grand Forks. So you can guess what happened to his toes there. I call him Nine Toe Christo. I don't know for a fact if he only has 9 toes. He might only have like 6. But like one of the rumors that I heard about it, allegedly, obviously, is that like after the picture, there was a picture of his foot, like after, like with the frostbite and everything, and it's like people throw up after seeing that. It's like just the most disgusting thing. And I asked Gage Asmus on Twitter. I asked him if he's seen the picture. He replied that he didn't, which is kind of a bummer because I want to know what this picture looks like. If this picture allegedly exists, like Fratton allegedly threw a lawnmower, could have been somebody else. I don't know. There's a lot of stories about that era of North Dakota that were all really interesting, and with the opening of a cop car door, TJ Oshie peeing allegedly in an elevator. There was a lot of stories about that.
Yeah, so compiled quite the greatest hits tape in that era of UND.
Like
hockey.
I don't know if Cameo is still a thing, but where you can buy like.
Oh, yeah, like a birthday greeting or something.
They have one for TJ Oshie, and I really want to buy one and just say, you got to tell me some of these North Dakota stories. Like, I bet we could, like, range. Like, I got to know some of this tea, how much of it is true and how much of it isn't, allegedly.
Yeah, that's a good idea. So, yeah, I don't know where to, I have a lot of thoughts on this. I guess I'll just put it out there. I would not. I don't really care if Fantilli wins. Although I know we're not picking from those 3, but if I were to pick from those 3, I would vote for Fantilli probably. The argument that Woden is responding to, and he does a lot of strong. Woden does himself no favors. He tends to be a really poor argument. He doesn't formulate very good arguments.
Has to be a facade. This all has to be an act to drive engagement. I swear to God, because he can't be this bad at arguments.
I think he's just bad at arguments.
You think so?
Yeah, I mean, I had mentioned a couple of weeks ago, I had a rant hip pocketed about, he did an article that was all in support of Alaska making the NCAAs. It seems moot to bring that rant up now. Maybe we'll get to it in the summer because some of his points, it had the opposite effect of his points, which he felt were mic drop points. I actually saw it like completely different, but because he brought up like they went on the road so often. And I think there's actually something there as far as when you can get a pairwise advantage by playing a majority of your games, majority of your schedule on the road. We can get to that, but that only was sparked to my mind based on his poor argumentation. Which in that article included, like, he compared the top 16 teams to top 20 teams at one point. He was really like fudging math in order to fit his arguments or to make them look as good as he could. Just like rudimentary or just bad faith arguing. I'm
really curious where the under 18 team would fit in the pairwise. Did they play enough games?
That's right.
Against college?
They'll play some home game. Like there's some weird teams that will play at Ann Arbor or wherever. I think it's in Ann Arbor, right? Or Detroit, somewhere in suburban Detroit. There'll be some teams that actually visit them. But for the most part, they play on the road. But anyway, that's just an example, I think, of he frustrates me because it seems like he just feels like he can throw out emotional arguments and just kind of yell increasingly louder. And that is seemingly a stand-in for an argument. I'm at a point too, it's just frustrating in general. Like that just seems to be what people do now. I don't even care what your conclusion is.
Yeah.
I don't care what your conclusion is. All I'm really interested in is making a cogent argument. I'll go along with any like BS premise. Just give me a compelling argument. And it doesn't matter if I agree with it or not. I'm just here for the argument. There's like a Twins beat writer who's like, yeah, I really think this is going to turn heads, but Kirby Puckett's the most overrated Twin ever. And I'm like stroking my beard. I'm like, okay, all right, I'm with you. Let's give me an argument. And he's just like, yeah, I just think he's overrated. I just think the fans think he's the best, and he's more like fifth best. Like, that's not an argument. Like, tell me, like, what, did he not walk enough? Like, is he like a huge analytics guy? But it was not any of that. It was just kind of emotions. And then it was also, Woden does this too. It's straw manning or building an assumed block of people. Like, so everybody thinks this. Whenever someone says, like Woden says, everyone thinks the Hobey is just the Heisman of college hockey. Everyone thinks it's just the best player in college hockey. So that way he can ignore the four laid out, like clearly enumerated bullet points of criteria that the Hobey Baker voters are given as criteria and how they vote on this award. So I don't know where you stand on this criterion of the Hobey, which is seemingly, as you said, Woden's biggest bugbear.
Yeah,
is he feels like you cannot adequately judge character based on a player, on a college hockey player, and he feels it's a BS thing to even have as a consideration for a voter. That frustrates me because, again, it's another one of these modern day, postmodern, I don't care what the rules say. I'm just going to interpret it how I feel it is. And then that should rule the day. What you should say, you should move to change the rules. Don't just pick it, like cherry pick which rules you're going to follow and then foist your own interpretation on what you think the award is. I feel like there is a movement in the last few years from Hobey voters. I think that they feel like Kyle Connor losing to VC. I feel like they feel like there's like egg on voters' faces for that. So I think there's a faction of Hobey voters. They vote for who's going to be the best pro player for the Hobey. Not necessarily what the Hobey Baker has traditionally gone for, which you could say is BS. You could say that Drew LeBlanc winning the Hobey over Christo or any of the other, Gaudreau was he was a player. He was up for, I think he was a top 10 finalist. It wasn't top 3, but he won it the next year.
I'm pretty sure Gaudreau was top 3.
I know that Hartzell was. Maybe he was the third. All right, that's a great example too. Like, obviously, you look at that, and Gaudreau's turned out to be way better than those Hartzell and LeBlanc as far as their pro careers go. But you can say it's BS that the Hobey has traditionally stood for or has been given to players like LeBlanc over guys like Gaudreau or Kyle Connor, or name your sexy freshman star, maybe giving it to a senior who has a more compelling narrative. That's the thing. Like, I'm fine with giving the award to Fantilli, but I'm also fine with a voter dinging Fantilli for any number of reasons. Not limited to, but including the fact that he is just a one and done guy. Again, you can disagree with the notion that it should just be the best player. Like, I could see you making that argument, but traditionally how this award has been presented, it's more for the, embodying the college athletics spirit to a greater degree. You're factoring in scholarship, you're factoring in sportsmanship, you're factoring in quote unquote character. And you're not just making it a performance-based award. And I kind of like that idea. if I was a top 10 voter of the Hobey, I would have definitely voted for Pollen to be in the top 3, because I think he's more representative of what the Hobey winners have been in the past. And again, you can say I'm fine with you disagreeing with that notion. Do you think that it should just be who's the best player? And you don't really like it's the best person or the best narrative, or he's been there he's a senior. Where are you thinking? I know I'm kind of just throwing stuff against the wall, but
I've always looked at that whole character assessment is like a way of saying of like college hockey trying to be on this moral high ground of like, well, it's not just about that. It's about being a good person too. And it's like, because I think it all kind of factors into also like this whole notion of like hockey is a classy sport. And it's like, oh, you're classless if you don't like hockey, or if you don't do it this way or whatnot. And it's like, we're a little more upscale in hockey. And I think there's a lot of icky undertones when it comes to that. So I would be okay if they just drop that. Because I think that whole character assessment can be weaseled into one too many ways. Now, Chriso, was his character that bad because he partied in college? I mean, no, I don't think so. But at the same token, the whole narrative around Drew LeBlanc coming back from injury to produce the season he did and to lead the Huskies and whatnot. I mean, you can make that assessment too. I mean, everybody knew that Goudreau was a better player even at that time. So I don't know. It's one of those things that I just feel every year there's always going to be some kind of talk about it and about that aspect. It just already a Heisman or best player or whatnot, it's always got that gray area anyway. So when you add that gray area to the best player, but on top of it, add this other asterisk of whatever you mean. And now apparently people have been saying, and again, I say people, I don't know the other argument because I just see Woden's point and Woden tweeting out and Woden writing articles. I don't see really anybody's counteract, but apparently it comes down to penalty minutes because Fantilli has more penalty and that's a character assassination.
Well,
and that doesn't make any sense to me.
Well, yeah, he's making a straw man argument there, yeah. I think, because it's not maybe the penalty minutes in total factor into it, but I think people point to he got into a fight. He got into a fight this year.
Jeez, in hockey. Oh, how dare.
Well, I'll say this. I mean, I've attended 300 plus college games, watched on TV hundreds more than that. I have never seen a college hockey fight. Obviously, they exist. And I might have forgotten one, but I feel like I would not forget a fight in college hockey.
I still remember the Minnesota State North Dakota fight that they had. Man, that was a heck of a scrum. That was a full-out line brawl.
We've seen like the end of the game, sort of everybody's out on the ice and bear hugging and that I've seen that several times, but I think I would have remembered an announcement of a penalty for, people going to the box 5 for fighting and game misconduct and blah, 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 blah. I don't remember that. And so I think maybe that's a worse case if you're trying to ding him for character based on penalty minutes to ding him on one incident in particular. But I think that's more of a case than just the penalty minutes as a total. He's making the worst possible argument there. I think, again, where do you draw the line? Oh, he didn't have many penalty minutes, but he did the Marty McSorley chop over the head. But he only had 20 penalty minutes other than that, so you can't ding him on penalty minutes. This was a fairly out of the ordinary incident. And even on their podcast, they're like, you go back to the video, he didn't even start it. Like they were doing that sort of excuse making for it. And again, I don't mind him getting the Hobey, and I expect him to win it. But I also don't blame a voter for voting against him because of that incident. Maybe that's preposterous, but again, because it's in the criteria itself, I don't think you can completely disregard that and still think that your argument holds water. And then when you point to a specific incident like that and you say it's the 67 penalty minutes. No, it's not the number. It's the quality of them. Same with Cooley. I mean, we saw in that Fargo Regional, the hack to the nuts of Cranola.
Yeah.
Like, it's a cheap shot. And he had other major. That wasn't a major, but he had I think 2 majors this year other than that. Should that be the deciding factor? I don't think any one thing should be the deciding factor. Okay, maybe if you murder a guy off, not on the ice, maybe that should play a factor. Maybe you shouldn't get the Hobey then. Where do you draw the line, though? Is it the Todd Bertuzzi hit kind of thing, or is it a fight? Woden also thought a mic drop argument was the fact that he got a Gordie Howe hat trick in that game because he got a goal and an assist in a fight in that Michigan State game. And he said that was the most retweeted tweet in CHN history. So he thought that meant that, see, everyone loves it. Give him the Hobey. I think there's room for gray area, and I don't have a huge take one way or the other on whether or not he should get the Hobey or not. I get more bothered by poor argumentation, and we seem to, like you said, the Hobey has these debates. I think they should at least maybe try to have a serious conversation as far as are the standards that are on paper right now, are those still relevant? I mean, Hobey's been around for 40 plus years. It's possible that
he
the
hasn't.
award.
He's been dead for a while.
But it's very possible that this award has evolved into something different than what it was in 1981. And if so, updating the criteria would be great, because at least then you'd be consistent and you'd be operating within the rules. I like the fact that we have like these topics about like MVP. As far as I know, like other sports, hockey, baseball, when they award an MVP, is there a specific criteria for MVP? Because we get into these semantic debates about what's valuable mean? Does valuable mean the best? Not necessarily. Maybe in this case, it's not. I actually appreciate the fact that the Hobey has specific criteria that you can go back to. But
everyone's criteria, like how they interpret that criteria, everyone's is different, that's what I don't like. Yeah. And that's why I wish it was more cut and dry when it comes to it.
It's always going to be
subjective. Yes, I understand that part of it. But to have it to be where, like, what does character mean to any specific voter? That's where my issue is, and what everything means. So,
yeah, it's always going to be a subjective process. Woden, I know we're beating up on him, but
that's fine.
He encapsulates a lot of these, a lot of the arguments that we've heard. So.
Maybe there'll be an article about us on CHN then.
Maybe.
So maybe that's.
But he's like, yeah. How do you judge character? For all you know, Logan Cooley goes home and kicks his dog. This is what he said on his podcast. First of all, it's kind of unfair to Logan Cooley. That's kind of like saying to someone, it's the classic trap question. Like, when did you stop beating your wife? You ask someone that. It's like, it's the leading of the question, but
what?
Because it puts into everyone's brain the fact that you're a bad person, even though it's just this BS hypothetical. But so he's like, yeah, you can't know. In his written article, he mentioned, what are we supposed to ask them their opinion about the war in Ukraine? Like, dude, do you realize how awful your arguments are? Do you even read yourself sometimes? Yeah, we don't know how these players. We don't know how these players are off the ice, aside from police reports in some cases, as you've referred to. But There is a way
Who
that you can
knows?
judge character based on their on ice actions.
And are you saying that Tony Mosey shouldn't be allowed to be eligible for Hobey just because he happened to walk on a cop car? Like, come on.
Doesn't he have some college eligibility left? I mean, he could come back and get that Hobey that he so richly deserves.
And talk about a character-driven art, like
Oh my God.
coming back from the depths of Florida Everblades tournament and walking on cop cars, coming back and winning the Hobey when he's 30.
Winning the Mosey.
Oh,
They should just rename the trophy.
Yes.
Rename the trophy after him. I
Let's-
think that's the only logical conclusion.
Come back
Let's send
in a year.
that to
Yeah.
Woden. Let's send that to Woden. I'm sure we'll get his stamp of approval.
Yep.
And
Exactly.
I think that does it for the Hobey Baker talk.
So you're voting Fantilli in your hypothetical ballot of the three, which again isn't how it works.
again,
but whatever.
I mean, of the three, I might vote for Nye. I think Nye's is I think he's better than Cooley. I think he's a better player, all around player than Cooley is. Cooley is the better offensive player, but Nye's is the better two-way player. And I haven't watched Fantilli enough. I haven't watched Michigan enough to the extent that, but I can read a stat line, and Fantilli makes plenty of sense. So maybe I'd go. Maybe Fantilli, Nye's, Cooley in that order.
Knives.
Like I said, I would have had Pollen in the top three.
Yeah,
but
Knives was the Big Ten Player of the Year. And Fantilli is in the same conference.
That's right.
So if we want to
You
flash,
have another one. You have like a cardigan.
So I want Fantilli to win, just so they know how it feels.
Think about that. Yes.
Yeah, just so they know how it feels to have the WCHA Player of the Year that the Huskies had for Hardigan, who ended up losing to Leopold, who was not the Big Ten player or the WCHA player.
The WCHA. Right.
So I want the shoe on the other foot in this case, and I want Fantilli.
I like that idea.
Even though I think Fantilli was Rookie of the Year, wasn't he, in the Big Ten? But
I would assume
don't care.
so. Maybe Cooley beat him out for that.
Yeah.
So
that's what I'm hoping. We'll see what happens, and then we'll see another 300 tweets from Woden about it. I would imagine.
I will say, I mean, probably more than half the time, I agree with Woden. I don't think he's. I enjoy CHN. I prefer it.
The guy knows his pairwise, so I guess that's anything pairwise related. He usually
I think he can be a decent writer. I feel like sometimes he doesn't make as good of arguments as he thinks he is making. And CHN needs a women's section. That's the one downside of CHN versus USCHO. USCHO has a much better women's hockey page or presence for that matter. They actually have like a writer that writes columns for them. So step that up, CHN. Because I don't like going to USCHO to check out their scores. That's like the only real reason I'll go to USCHO.
God, USCHO. The downfall of USCHO is just something. Like in my app on my iPad, every time I click show women in the CHN app, it crashes. So it's just.
I don't even have that on their app that I have through Android.
Yeah.
There is no women's function for it. And I only even found that on their website only like this year. But it's all just paid. It's just scores and standings. It's all it is.
Yeah, exactly. So. All right. Well, we have another segment, but I mean, we're coming up on 2 hours. So, what would you say about, we can just hammer through the segment, or we can even introduce the segment, have it for next week, and then even the week after do the actual awards. So like an extra show.
No, let's do it now.
Let's do it now.
No extra show.
Oh, all right.
It won't take us too long because we can expand more next week, sort of on the nominees and the winners, not to spoil things too much of the segment that we're just going to delve into, but we're talking we're entering awards season.
Yes, it is. It is award season right now. So
new feature,
our end of the year awards here, and
first time that we've done this.
First time
we're christening these. These are just St. Cloud State relevant awards. We've got 6 categories. So think of it like the Oscars, but for St. Cloud State Hockey, not the Oscars. It's the Herbies.
The Herbies.
The first annual Herbies presented by the Huskies Hockey Podcast. We are going to be in black tie next week. Tuxedos and
the full bit.
The champagne will be flowing like beer.
I think Craig Dahl will be MC, special MC. Doing the announcements,
right. And we're going to try to get some some listener engagement involved here too. So what we're going to do is, we've got 6 categories of Huskies Hockey Awards. We're going to get 3 nominees for each category.
3 nominees for each category.
Is there one that we have 4 nominees that we couldn't?
Nope, we split that into 2 different categories.
Oh, yeah, that's right. So we got 3 nominees for each.
Yep.
And we're going to put these out for a vote on Twitter, each of these categories by the next week. So the next week's show, we are going to announce the winners.
Yep, exactly.
And how we're going to vote on these, I get a vote, Weldie gets a vote, and then the Twitter vote will count as a vote. There might be some ties involved, but we'll break them one way or the other.
We'll flip it.
This is not a scientific process, but we want to get the listeners involved and have the listeners have their say. And so what we'll do now is we will reveal the categories and the nominees because we want to keep this short. We don't want to go all night here. We might just have a token little sentence or 2 about the category. Next week, we can kind of go in depth through each nomination. And
like the Oscars will have like a clip of,
and we hopefully if Weldie is on his SHIT, we'll have some clips in the Twitter poll, at least for one of the categories.
So we might as well just go with it.
So we'll start with this one, the first category.
Yeah, the Aaron Brocklehorst goal of the year.
Yes, so we have some blast from the past that we named these awards for. But the moment of the year is the Aaron Brocklehorst Huskies moment or goal of the year. I'm sorry, goal of the year. I'm getting ahead of myself. Yep. Goal of the year. So our 3 nominees are.
Actually, this is one we have 4. So
sorry. See, this is the amateur production.
So yeah, exactly. Totally forgot.
Deliver.
So we've got Adam Ingram against Bemidji, where he was dangle and toe drag. We've got Jack Peart against Mankato. That one put us up 2-0 in the regional.
2-0 in the NCAAs.
The NCAAs that went bar down. And we have Zach Okabe, the game-winning overtime goal against North Dakota to eliminate North Dakota and to advance the Huskies into the frozen face-off at the X.
Frozen face-off.
And then we've got the 195-footer. Oh, wait, no, this one wasn't the 100. That was
180?
180-footer from Brendan Bushy against Colorado College. Who was able to snipe. So those are the 4 goals.
This was the only category that we had the 4 nominees.
Yes.
But
everything else
we really wanted to fit all 4 of those in. We couldn't figure a way to knock one of those out. So those are the 4 nominees. And like I said, if Weldie's what I think he is, he'll have each of the clips of these goals available sometime in the next week. It's kind of like sending out a screener to the Oscar voters. You see the movie before you vote on it. You want to see the goal before you vote on it too. That Ingram goal was a pretty one, and I think people might forget that because that was beginning of the year.
Yeah, it was early.
But we got a couple at the end of the year that people maybe are more familiar with, or at least it's more recent. So enjoy those, and those are our 4 nominees for best goal. How about what's our next category?
Next category, we'll go with the Chuck Clausen, a moment of the season.
Moment of the year.
Moment of the year here. We have the home sweep of North Dakota with the 2 multi-goal comebacks. We've got Brett Larson with his 100th win as a coach, and the video of all the players hiding in Omaha, which was kind of a feel-good moment. And then the Frozen Face-Off winning the Frozen Face-Off for the championship for the NCHC. So those are those.
Some good nominees all around.
Good nominees. Anytime that North Dakota loses, I'm always a fan. So
that's correct.
So, and then I realize for freshman of the year, I didn't pick out a name.
I threw it out in pre-show. Andreas Nodal.
Oh, that's right. Yes, the Andreas Nodal freshman of the year. I wanted to really name it the Tony Mosey.
But that's our character of the year.
That's our. Oh yeah,
which
exactly.
doesn't exist.
Doesn't exist. But
it exists in our hearts.
Yeah. But he was not a freshman when he scored against Northern Michigan. So he was a freshman against Clarkson. So that's kind of a bummer. Freshman of the year, we have Adam Ingram, Cooper Wiley, and Jack Rogers, our 3 freshman nominees. Freshman of the year.
All good candidates.
All good. And really all 3 of them kind of came into their own as the season kind of went on.
All got better, and they played their best at the end of the year,
which is
a good sign.
So, forward, the Drew LeBlanc forward of the year. We have Cronulla, Cruikshank, and Okabe are the 3 nominees for forward of the year.
This is tough competition.
I did not realize that Okabe, I think he's at 95 points on his career. So I didn't know he was that far up on the list, or I didn't think he was that close to 100. Yeah.
Yep. Hopefully he can get over 100 coming back next year.
Exactly. So then obviously the Hedeken defenseman of the year. I lobbied really hard for the Justin Fletcher or the Grant Clafton defenseman of the year, but did not get it.
Casey Boron, which I mangled his name on the last show.
So we should have gone with Dave Iannazzo for forward of the year.
Born to score.
Dave Iannazzo. So anyway, defenseman, Brett Hedeken, defenseman of the year. We're going with Anhorn, Peart, or Meyer are the 3 nominees there. For
another good 3 nominees. You got the Anhorn. This one's going to be an interesting one too, because you got a good case for Anhorn, but then you have a good negative case for him too, because he was injured for much of the year. Peart, healthy all year. But then you have Meyer too, sort of sliding in there as maybe a Pacino, Scent of a Woman kind of
a legacy pick,
a legacy,
and has the character as well.
And has the character.
Never mind.
Yes, indeed.
Just like Hedeken has character, I assume. So
that's right. Should we actually make this the Brett Hedeken and Christy Yamaguchi? Because they're always kind of coupled together.
I mean,
in each sentence.
My wife listens to this podcast, so it would probably be the Christy Yamaguchi, Brett Hedeken defenseman of the year. So
we'll workshop that.
We'll workshop that.
See what the
I say Justin Fletcher. I think we could just put that name down. And obviously, as I'm talking about defenseman of the year, everyone is probably yelling at their radio dial, their podcast machine, on what defenseman we're missing. Well, that's because obviously he's the MVP, the most valuable player, the most valuable Husky, the Jeff Finger Memorial most valuable player. So the Jeff Finger Award. Our 3 nominees for the Jeff Finger Award goes to Cruikshank, Cronulla, and Castor. So those are going to be the three nominees there.
We really kind of discussed that.
There was a lot of talk about that. And obviously our Bobby Gepfert goalie of the year, or our Jace Wazlowski Xbox of the year. Unfortunately, that would have been a tie. But MVP with how Caster ended, it was tough to pick 3 MVP nominees, and I'm interested in how that vote and the forward, the Drew LeBlanc Tony Mosey of the Year award, how that was going to go. So
and play of the year, I think should have some competition there between the nominees. Moment of the year as well. We don't want these to be blowouts as far as from the fan vote perspective. We want them to have several votes for each.
I do think that Chuck Lawson moment of the year is going to be a blowout. But
which one? That was the.
I think a frozen face-off. I don't want to. I don't want to editorialize too much. I don't want to.
We wanted to get Larson specifically involved in that one. So if you're a real big fan of Larson, you can go out of your way and vote for him for that award. Or as you said, everyone loves beating North Dakota.
Yeah,
those comeback wins were certainly a sexy moment of the year too.
Very much so.
I like the intrigue that this slate of nominees gives us. So please follow Weldie's Twitter account and then vote on these as he as the next week comes closer, and we will present the Herbies on the next show.
Exactly. So you can follow me at More Clappers, MOAR, More Clappers, or you can send in your votes to Andrew as well.
You can do that if you'd like. You can send me those at Huskies Hockey Podcast at gmail.com.
And just for really Dan Jacobson, you can't vote twice. So if you vote on my Twitter, you can also vote in Andrew's email. So that's
well, and in all fairness, he is off watching the Twins in Miami this week.
That's true.
And then is he going? I think he's said he's going to the Frozen.
Yeah, that's one of the questions. It'll be what will be the attendance at the Twins Marlins game that he attends tomorrow. I would probably guess about 400.
I gotta check the attendance today. I can't imagine. I didn't see any of the game, but I can't imagine it was more than 10,000. I bet you this: it's the Frozen Four will greatly outdraw the baseball game. But maybe maybe they're drawing more than I thought they had been. I have no idea. But and isn't that so? If he's going to the Frozen Four, isn't Miami like 4 hours from Tampa? I don't think they're necessarily very close. But I suppose
he's got a couple days to get there.
I suppose it's not that much different from like a Duluth to the cities drive or something. So maybe it's it makes sense from that regard.
Do they have a train?
I would imagine that the state of Florida has a train somewhere running. I would think so. You got to watch out for the Alligator Alley, though. Dan, just word of advice. There are alligators in Florida, and you want to avoid those. And so just be sure to be safe and avoid the alligators.
Oh, geez, the Brightline only goes up to West Palm Beach.
You're seriously looking up train lines in Florida?
Well, lately I've been getting really big into the fact that we don't have high-speed rail, and we really should. And that's like one of the major like high-speed rail that we have is the Brightline is starting to become up and coming. And then obviously the Northeast corridor.
I've not heard of that. The Acela.
Acela, yeah.
I have. That's obviously big. But there's one one of
that's
something
a little
like
more
that
modern
in Florida.
Yeah, but it only goes from Miami up to West Palm Beach. It doesn't go.
It's just in Florida. It's not like I thought you were thinking like to Atlanta or like the whole region.
I think like the plan was supposed to do that, but no.
Yeah, but the plan of the Northwest corridor was to go all the way to St. Cloud, right? But they stopped at Big Lake, and doesn't seem like they're getting any further than that.
Not anytime soon, at least. But that's not high speed either. I think the Brightline. Granted the Brightline. I think
it's like bullet train. 200 miles an hour, something like that.
Yeah, I think even the Brightline only goes to about 80 or 90. So,
well, that we'll conclude that on our spin-off show.
Yeah.
Planes, Trains, and Automobiles.
Yes.
Infrastructure in the United States. Hosted by Weldie and Andrew.
Yeah. I mean, just I like the idea.
Our first guest on that is Dave Starman talking about bike lane.
God, I don't know. Like, maybe my next Twitter poll should be who hates this more, and it's either Dave Starman against the bike lanes or Woden against the character clause in the Hobey. Like, good God. like I don't have a problem with Starman in the hockey sense, but like he always retweets this one account who has like 300 followers about stop bike lanes in New York City and whatnot, and congestion pricing and all of that. It's like, that's anyway, just interesting.
Yeah, it's good stuff. That first episode of that spin-off podcast it'll
be a doozy. So I do have to say though, Andrew Mueller did have a question, and it kind of stemmed from the Twitter kind of revenue and expenditures of hockey for programs all around the country. And his question is just kind of with the expense for St. Cloud, 40th in the country, expending about $2 million. Revenue was about 2.3 million. Basically, a lot of people are taking this and looking at as like St. Cloud isn't investing a lot of money into college hockey, and was just wondering, Andrew's question, it was really well articulated. So I'll just kind of read it really quickly. After seeing the hockey budget list, the discussion at the Herb being an aging facility and bigger schools being able to throw NIL dollars coupled with admin doesn't seem to have athletics on the forefront. I don't know if I agree with that part of it. I think they have athletics, but I think like it's more about the changing of the makeup of it's just harder to get people in the seats in general. So I still think that they do have athletics and especially hockey in the forefront. It seems like the gap is widening between the top and the bottom in terms of the expenditures. How long is that sustainable? Can we keep Larson if and when he leaves outside of a successful program? The rest isn't nearly as attractive as most other colleges, like Wisconsin, for instance, throwing a lot more money, a lot more resources than St. Cloud is able to kind of offer. So that's that whole kind of list, and I'm always kind of interested as well as what they consider or what the college kind of considers as expenditures. Like, does it include absolutely everything dollar and cent that comes out of the hockey program or paid to a hockey program? The food, the travel, hotels, salaries, NIL, booster money. I feel like there's also that kind of gray area. I know it has to be reported, but to what extent can you do some creative accounting as well? I don't know. That's why I took that as a little bit of a grain of salt. But basically, if we're 40th in spending and we're one of the top teams in the country, I think that's a really good return on investment. So I think that's a positive thing, not a negative thing. I'd be more worried about just the fact that our revenue is so far down. And again, that goes to how tough it is for St. Cloud to draw as of late.
Yeah, it's a big question, a big long-term question. And as far as that list, which I did see, I didn't linger on it too much. I'd like to know what the source of that is. I mean, from what I saw, it was a list that was posted on Twitter. I don't know
that's about
how much I should believe of that, but I assume based on the source of who posted that they're not just blowing complete hot air. So I'd like to know exactly. And did you say that you saw a revenue figure for St. Cloud? Like it was like you said the budget was, or the expenditures was like $2 million, where the revenue was 2.3.
Yes.
Where did you get that number? The revenue
later on in the same thread.
Oh, it was.
Yep.
I didn't see that part. That doesn't surprise me though. The 40th out of 61 or whatever the number of teams in D1 is, doesn't surprise me that St. Cloud's in the bottom third of that. The trend is, I remember a couple of years ago talking to a friend about the way that St. Cloud State as a university has been trending is not very good.
I just looked at enrollment, and like enrollment's like at 7,000 right now,
and that's full-time equivalent. I think when we were going, it was somewhere in like 17 to 18,000, maybe 16. It was somewhere close to double, or maybe even more than double what it is now, which is a pretty monumental drop in 15 years since we've been in school, basically. So any sort of chart that charts that is just going to look like a nosedive. And so I remember when I was talking to this friend a couple of years ago, it's like 20 years from now, I am not confident St. Cloud State is going to have an athletic department. I am not confident that St. Cloud State's going to exist as a university. If these numbers continue, I mean, it's not going to get down to zero, but I don't think that we're not talking about Yale here. We haven't got a lifetime existence secured as St. Cloud State University, how that's concerned. I remember it was a few months ago that you sent me something regarding Miami and about how their AD was crying poor and about they wanted out of the NCHC. But they did, but it's like $1 million exit fee of the NCHC, and God, how can we pay that? As if $1 million, what are we living in 1840? Like $1 million? It's like the Austin Powers, like $1 million. My God. And I've always had I did some research there at that time, because I'm like, I'm pushing back on the notion that Miami is like a poor college. They're a public university. Their endowment is somewhere in the range of $650 million, which for a public university is very, very good. The highest endowment in the NCHC is Denver. Denver and CC have $800 to $900 million. Which they're prestigious public or private universities or colleges in CC's case. Western Michigan was like $300 or $400 million, and that makes sense because they're a big, D1 and all sports kind of institution. But Miami was third on that list. St. Cloud, it's tough for me to figure this number out. I believe I got last year's, or maybe it was the 2021 fiscal year. But as far as I could tell, I think that their endowment is $44 million, which is the lowest of the lowest in the NCHC. Omaha was like 100. I think Duluth was around 100. UND maybe 200-ish. I don't know I think I've mentioned everybody in the conference. And so endowment's not everything, but that's just your war chest. That's the amount of money that you have on hand. Like Miami, for instance, I saw something like they had $90 million in donations for athletics only last year alone. The idea that they can't afford a buyout fee from the NCHC is ludicrous. And they're a wealthy institution. They're a blue blood compared to St. Cloud, but getting back to St. Cloud is just, you look at that, how that contextualizes St. Cloud within the other schools in their conference, and the way that the trends have been going as far as enrollment, and then also what our questioner brings up as far as the rising expenses, nil money, that's going to be more of a factor as the years go on. The facility gap. We mentioned that last week. If the real only hope is really kind of begging the state government to earmark some funds for them to get the upgrades to the Herb. If that doesn't happen, I mean, that precipitous slide continues even more. I don't want to be doomsaying, but just from a reality standpoint, is he's saying that he doesn't feel like the administration, what was his, the admin isn't like athletics
isn't a forefront.
Which you push back on. The one thing I would give as far as credence to his point is we still don't have a permanent AD. We have this Holly Schreiner, who I only recently learned was their interim AD, but it's been, when was Weems hired? Last summer? It's been close to a year, and we still don't have a permanent athletic director. That's not a good sign, I think. We at least need to get someone permanent in there, as far just simply as a figurehead to give an appearance of permanence, or at least a long-term commitment to athletic director, which is a huge position for a school when it comes to athletics. It's your number one point person with that kind of stuff. So the lack of finding someone permanent in that position, I think, is troubling. And it does sort of point to a lack of commitment to athletics, and obviously having to drop sports in recent years is not a good trend either. But that's not limited to St. Cloud only. I mean, the Gophers had to do that too. Big schools are having to drop sports left and right as well to keep up with these, the new economics of NCAA athletics. But yeah, it's just, and as far as like Larson bolting, I mean, that's kind of a Cadillac problem to me. Like, for I'm talking about long-term sustainability for St. Cloud, like, let's just hope in 20 years that we still have a team to root for. And as far as like the short term for Larson, now that Wisconsin has its guy hired, looking at all the Big Ten, they've kind of went through their recent wave of hiring new coaches. Like, the wave of old coaches has now been replaced by a new wave. Minnesota with Motzko, Wisconsin with Hastings, Michigan State. We saw that Michigan took the interim tag off of Navarro. Nightingale, a good first year with Michigan State. Rollick seemed like he was either committed to Ohio State, or maybe Wisconsin just fell in love with Hastings. But either way, Rollick's entrenched in Ohio State. And then Godowski with Penn State, he doesn't seem to be going anywhere anytime soon. So as far as big programs that potentially Larson would be linked to, I think we're done with that for now, for the short term. Obviously, the Duluth one is kind of the big one. Like, you figure if Sandelin's going to retire in the next few years, which I don't think he's like close to retirement, but let's say 10 years. Yeah, and if Larson's still around, that's, it's pretty natural to connect the dots there. But I feel a little bit more confident that we don't have, at least in the West, we don't have the sorts of jobs coming available that potentially could lure Larson away. So I'm confident in that regard. But long term, yeah, it's certainly not guaranteed. And you hope that the more success that the hockey team can have, the more that can maybe bring in money. If that can somehow translate to more revenue, even when we were signing those number one overall seed years, it's not like they were selling the building out in those years. And in the year, sometimes they have like a bounce the year after. That didn't seem to be the case either. So yeah, it's troublesome. And I don't know what the solution is, other than me winning the lottery and then giving a bunch of money to St. Cloud. Like, I wish I was in the position to be a money bags sugar daddy. It's just not in the cards for me at this point.
Weldie hit up Richard Dean Anderson, famous
yes
SCSU alum.
Get MacGyver to give us some of that money. But yeah, rambling for a bit. But if you have any other comments on this, it's a good deep topic that it's a tough one to address, but I think it is important to do so.
Yeah, it's tough, and just where St. Cloud is as a university too. It is. We got a lot of issues. There's a lot of things kind of going that are not trending the way that it should. And I think it all stems to just not having the funds. And, there's just something that needs to happen to get these fans back in the building, to the days of selling out and whatnot. But I don't know. It's going to be tough in this climate. So that's for sure.
Well, we don't want to.
I wish I had answers.
Don't want to end the show on such a low note.
Yeah, it's a bummer. So if I don't know. I could pull up a random box score.
Let's do that.
Let's.
All
right, sounds good. Last time I did is when we restarted with Tony Mosey. So let's pick this year.
I like this idea of ending the show on this.
Yeah.
On this bit. Like
boom. Okay. Since they're in the Frozen Four, let's talk about. We played. Really? Did this game happen? January 6th.
Now you're really getting me intrigued.
2006, 2007 against Boston University.
Really?
At home.
No.
Look at that, 4-1.
It must not have been at home. It must have been at some tournament.
Yeah, I don't remember this game. Oh,
I would have been.
Okay, yep. That's why I don't remember. I clicked women's.
Okay, all right. That explains. Well, just give us the rundown there. They beat BU.
They did beat BU 4-1.
Were you the beat writer that year?
No, I was the next year.
They beat them 4-1. Who are some of the scorers?
Haley Clarkson, who centered Caitlin Hogan and Holly Roberts. Caitlin Hogan, she was.
You like that line?
Yeah, Caitlin Hogan and Holly Roberts. I mean, they were excellent together. Mm-hmm. Megan Fezon was that have been their
freshman year?
I think so.
Okay, because I fear because it was the 9-10 year. Was that Geeson's best year? Or was it that 07-08?
I think it was.
I know he had a couple of good years in that, but I think with those,
it was the 07-08 year was his best year, okay. And that's the year that I covered.
Maybe this 09-10 was the last year they beat the Gophers, but I know they had a decent year.
Until this
end of the aughts, till this year. But anyway,
Fezon, Laura Fast. Laura Fast is always fun to talk to. I had a class with Stacy Day and Laura Fast. They were always really nice to me, even though I bet they were just annoyed with me because I would.
So we don't need another one. I think we got enough here. What did they play them in St. Cloud? You said Was it a 2-game series?
Yep, it was a tie the first night.
So this was a Saturday game.
Yep.
Okay. And I wonder how good was BU that year? Like, what was their record if you have it on the box score? Because BU had some decent years on the women's side in the
they were 11-7-2.
Oh, okay. I know in the early teens, I think they made a tournament or two. I mean, we've said like Hockey East has never really been at the level of the men's version of Hockey East, but then particularly the WCHA for the women's side.
And on that same day, we in 07 on January 6th of 07 we played Alaska Anchorage, and obviously
we had to have at St. Cloud.
Yep.
So we didn't lose.
It was again 4-1 win. So there were back-to-back 4-1 wins.
They're both at home, so it must have been the women's game in the afternoon, and then the men's game.
Do you want to guess who the referee was in this game? Anchorage against St. Cloud State.
Marco Hunt?
Todd Anderson.
Classic.
So, Andrew Gordon with the scoring, and then Nate Day, Johnny Swanson, and then Andrew Gordon topped it off at the end for a 4-1 victory. Jace Wozlowski got the win, and then promptly went on Xbox after.
Well, and Geffert would have still been there that year. Yeah, that would have been his last year, I believe. Yeah, it was.
I mean, it was only his fourth start. So
Wazlowski for that in that year.
Yeah. God, we were four.
Yeah, and you're giving him. Yeah, you'd give him the start at home against Anchorage because Anchorage sucked. So that's when you give Geffert the night off.
14-3-3 we were after this game.
It seemed they would always in the second half of the year, like January or February, it seemed like they would always check this on the schedule. They would always play like Anchorage and Tech at home, like back to back, and they'd always go 4-0 in those. Like they would always seem to like go on a hot streak in the second half by sweeping those teams at home. Obviously, not every year they'd play them in back-to-back series, but whenever they would play them at the Herb, it was just we can get off the mat this weekend and sweep these teams, and that was the case that weekend.
Jeez.
They did sweep them, Anchorage, that weekend.
Yes, they did. God,
yeah, I bet
Nate Day centering Andreas Nodal and Andrew Gordon.
It's a good line.
They combined with 6 points on the night. Lash was held off the board. Stevenson, Fletcher, my boy Fletcher got an assist. Clafton did not. He was -1. John Ammerman played.
He was good. I remember one of my friends from high school was he was like next door dorm with Gordon in their freshman year. So he's like in Sherburne.
Yeah.
Was his dorm. But he said, yeah, he didn't see him very much because, as a hockey player, like for those Alaska trips, I remember being a TA for a class that Brett Barta was in it. Mm. And when they go up to Anchorage, I think they would leave on Tuesday.
That sounds
so, like
right.
There were several times where they would say, I can't be in class. Like he'd have to send in his papers, like, at a different date and do like sometimes tests. He'd have to reschedule the tests and all that. It was almost like more often than not, those guys weren't in the class. There was a couple of, I can't remember, this Barta was a couple of other guys. I'm blanking on who it was, but there was a few of the players that were in those classes. It's like, I had to stay neutral and not sort of be like, go get them. But it was always fun. Good. Yeah, it's a good pull. I like that 06-07 year. It's a good nostalgia year.
Except for Ben Bishop.
Yeah, that one did. Justin Fletcher scored a goal in that game.
Scored the first goal. Yep.
And
early too.
High water mark.
3.5 minutes in.
So then Maine beat them. Do you know who they played in the regional final?
Ooh. Michigan?
No, they were the 1 seed, but they were upset by the 4 seed. UMass. Goalied by Jonathan Quick.
Oh, no kidding.
And I think that was like a 1-0 game in the regional final. It was a tight affair based on the 2 goalies involved.
Yeah,
both with obviously long NHL careers. It's not surprising.
Not surprising at all, yeah. What a goaltending duel. So,
and that was so weird too, the UMass, because before Carville got there, I think that was their only tournament appearance. Yeah, it was a good one.
Well, that about does her.
And about does it.
So thank you so much for listening to the Huskies Hockey Podcast. We'll be back next week. Check out my Twitter. Over the next couple of days, I'll get the Twitter votes going for the awards and
first annual Herbies.
So at Twitter at More Clappers, MOAR More Clappers, and Andrew, you can reach him at
Huskies Hockey Podcast at gmail.com.
Send an email. All right, and until next time, go Huskies. Woo! Woo!